Hi there, everyone. This is lesson 10, Saturday, March 28th. I had to set up in a different venue today because in the usual spot, there's a Skype conversation going on with Aga speaking to her mother in Poland. So, I have to find another place. Okay, this is kind of a milestone, number 10. I wonder how many more there will be. I guess it'll be fun to find out. So, hello everyone. Hope you're all staying healthy and sane. There's no doubt this is a very challenging time for all of us. That's especially true for the young because of all the uncertainty which surrounds us every day. Before I said goodbye to my students, and by the way, I did not say goodbye, but rather, one of my favorites, I said, I'll see you when I see you. I explained some things to them to try to make them understand that this will not be so bad for them. I reminded them of all the children of Poland who began their school year in 1939. On September 1st of that year, German bombers filled the sky overhead and German tanks rolled down their streets. Several years ago, I visited a place called Westerplatte in the city of Gdańsk, northern Poland, on the coast of the Baltic Sea. It is the exact spot where the first shots of World War II were fired at the Polish. Many of those young Polish students would not return to a classroom for several years. Some never would. Some would find themselves in the true nightmare of concentration camps. If you want to know what that was like, watch the movie The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. But in the morning, you'll need plenty of Kleenex. By the war's end, fully 25% of the entire Polish population had perished, the highest percentage of any country during World War II. But as always, there was a bright side. In the midst of that war, life went on, children were born. One of those children who was born then was my future mother-in-law in 1943, in the midst of war and Nazi occupation. That's who's on Skype right now. The enemy we face now steals away less than 1% of any given population. While each and every human life is indeed precious, and any loss of life is tragic, understand that people have faced far deadlier enemies in the past, and they have defeated those enemies as surely as we will defeat this one. I explained to my students that sometimes in history, young people just like them can survive through truly horrible events and go on to live normal lives. I once had a Holocaust survivor speak to my students years ago. We humans are amazingly tough creatures. Well, most of us. If you are ever feeling sad for yourself because you are stuck in a comfortable house with plenty of food and toilet paper, with virtually unlimited choices in music and movies, and surrounded by those you love, if you're feeling sorry for yourself in that situation, then stop and think for a moment of those Polish children back in 1939 and their parents. I think you will realize that for the vast majority of us, this is not so bad after all. Speaking of difficult and dark times, that's exactly what George Washington was facing in the summer of 1775. On April 19th of that year, the American Revolution had officially begun. At places we know as Lexington and Concord, American militia exchanged gunfire with British forces sent from Boston to hunt down the rebel leaders. There were deaths on both sides, and the British retreated to Boston. There was no turning back now. The Patriots as they became known, now had only two choices: victory or death. The British would attack the rebel army surrounding Boston at the famous Battle of Bunker Hill, where Patriots killed 700 British soldiers, but then they ran out of ammunition and were forced to retreat. On July 2nd of that year, Washington would arrive to take command of this rebel army. 1 year and 2 days later, July 4th, 1776, Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, and several others would publish one of the most important documents ever written by man. Do you know what that is? Bueller? I hope you know. Okay, I'll give you a hint. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Patriots had happiness on their side. How could they lose? George Washington faced what must have seemed to be an impossible task. He would literally almost have to create an army from nothing. There was no formal American army, only colonial militias, which were the equivalent of today's National Guard. Washington would have to form, train, and lead into battle what came to be known as the Continental Army. Washington would lead that Continental Army into battle against what was the greatest and most powerful army on earth at that time, the British Army. They were the most well-trained, well-equipped soldiers in the world. 50,000 of them would fight against the Patriots. They had also brought with them German Hessian mercenaries. Mercenaries are soldiers who fight only for money, not for country. I once had an offer to be a mercenary after I left the army, but I would never fight just for money. The Hessians had a fierce reputation in battle and had seen many wars. They were known for using long bayonets on their rifles to stab their enemies. The British would eventually bring 30,000 Hessians to America. How could the rebel colonists possibly stand up to such a massive force? Things must have really seemed scary to them back then. George Washington had less than 20,000 troops to begin this long and brutal war, though eventually several 100,000 would serve in the Patriot cause. By early 1776, the Continental Army was down to 9,600 men, and the British were safely still in Boston. Washington would have his first of many miracles in March, when large cannons arrived that had been captured from the British in New York. They set up cannons in the heights overlooking Boston and began to bombard the British ships in the harbor. You know, the same harbor where the colonists threw all that tea a few years back, which kind of started this whole thing. Over the next 10 days, the British evacuated Boston by ship, and Washington and his army entered the city. He ordered vaccinations against smallpox, which were greatly effective. Of course, he himself was immune because he already had it. One day, we will have a vaccine to fight our current enemy as well. In April, Washington moved his army to New York to set up defense against an expected British attack there. They must have been horrified when it eventually came on July 2nd, 1776. Excuse this chair, it's making noise. The same day, they were July 2nd, 1776. The same day, they were finishing the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia. In fact, John Adams is quoted as saying, "July 2nd will always be remembered in history." He was off by 2 days. On July 2nd, more than 100 British ships of the line carrying thousands of troops, British and Hessian troops, sailed into New York Harbor to crush the Continental Army once and for all. The rebel leaders, especially Washington, were to be hanged after they were captured. Victory or death. Now that's motivation. After the crushing blow, as the crushing blow was about to smash the Continental Army, Washington had another of his miracles and brilliant moves. He snuck the army away, complete and intact, in a single night under the cover of darkness, leaving the British to scratch their heads. It seemed impossible. The situation reached a low point in men and morale. It looked like all would soon be lost. But Washington would make another brilliant move and have another miracle on Christmas night, 1776. We'll learn about that tomorrow. Stay healthy, everyone. By the way, when this is all over, I'll be available to give out hugs to everyone who needs one. I think we all do.